Alright, F2P dagger cav is finally happening. Wait a sec. I might have forgot a certain someone. Oh. Oh yeah, that guy. Oops.
Let the lesson begin.
What's up guys, Akariss here, bringing you another Fire Emblem Heroes video. Today's video is, it's time to talk about Deen. Now a little bit of a preface here, as I always do. I actually know nothing about Deen, despite Valentia being actually one of my top 3 Fire Emblem games. And this is because in the game you choose between him and a certain other character. I'm not going to spoil for those that haven't played Valentia, but basically the choice is between him as a character or someone else who I think is probably more popular to many. So I don't know anything about Deen because I haven't played through Valentia a second time, and when I do, I'll likely pick Deen just to know more about him. So for me, I guess I'm a little bit in the unknown here, but he does come from one of my favorite Fire Emblem games, so I gotta do my due diligence here and help you guys talk about and think about Deen and where he might stand in your game. Now, on first impression, when we got Deen, I actually thought it wasn't much. It was man, whatever, this isn't that interesting of a freebie that we're getting, but throughout this video, I may change your opinion on that as I show you some builds, some setups, and some comparisons that may make you second guess whether Deen is actually pretty good as a freebie, because honestly, he might be. So yeah, with that being said, as I always do in these videos, if you appreciate this content and it really does help you, well, the most easiest and effective, fast way to show me, and yes, I do watch this stuff both in the comment section and on my statistics, is literally just pressing the thumbs up button, which takes half a second, and I hope you've done it by the time I said it. So yeah, show me that you care so that I can keep doing this. Sub if you haven't already, since about 33% of you are not, so... Alright, let's talk about this. First up, I'm going to take a look at his art, just to see where he stands compared to... I don't know, a couple of other freebies we've gotten. We've had some pretty good quality freebies, to be honest. So Deen is, I guess he's a desert guy. You kind of do pick him up in the desert according to the story, so it does fit as being a freebie. And I believe this art is by Penacor, who also drew some Rosandor. So I do appreciate the certain aspects associated with this art. The weapon looks very similar to what Ninja Shamir had, by the way, but yeah, it's very fitting. I think it matches him totally well, and for a desert outfit, it makes sense. Although it's probably a little bit kind of cold during the night, because deserts aren't always hot. It's get pretty chilly, so hopefully he has a solution for that. But anyways, enough about the art. Let's jump into the more meat of this video, which is going to start with his stats, the fodder, and of course, if you do commit, you can also use them in Arena. So for those of you that don't know, his weapon is Bone Carver, which is right under me here, and his weapon is pretty much just like a Savage Blow and a Poison Strike. So it's just literally 7 damage and splashing that 7 damage, but also giving 5 attack and speed. That may not seem really good, but I do actually have some purpose for it. And you'll notice in this showcase, talking about Deen here, that the new recent daggers involving Quick and Vicious Dagger are actually pretty good, and I'm glad to see them. But there honestly are so many good daggers in the game, and pretty much free ones as well, ranging from Tamari, he's not going to use Tamari, but Tamari and Cleaner, for example, and a couple other freebies that you can get in Paths and Ephemera, such as Armor Slaying, Dragon Slaying, and Cav Slaying daggers, and it makes dagger units pretty flexible. And if you want to go full meme, you could even do something like Poison Dagger if effective against infantry, but we are living more in an armor and turn meta than we are infantry, so Poison Dagger will have to wait. But yeah, dagger flexibility in terms of fodder options are pretty good. So as you'll notice on the far left here, his stats are a 36-39 stat spread with 27 defense and 23 res with 43 HP. That's actually pretty decent for a range cav, as you'll see in a moment as I show you just a couple of the comparisons we got here. So right under me, what you'll see is Merlinus, who... Okay, so if you're using Merlinus, probably for any content in the game, it's not going to be anything competitively, I think. He's basically designed as a meme character, because with 20 attack stat, you can't really do much. Merlinus does have better bulk than Deen, and that could potentially be good, as Merlinus could be a Wings of Mercy beacon, but he's not going to really do much except annoy, which I guess if you give Deen's dagger, the Bone Carver, to Merlinus, maybe that ends up being pretty good, so that he can do annoying things like smokes and splash damage. But Bone Carver definitely would fit more of this guy under us. Now, some other things to consider in some more recent releases as well is someone like Mia, who has 35-41 of a stat spread with much less bulk, and her preference weapon is actually still pretty good, where it gives you like damage reduction on the first hit, plus of course extra attack and speed. Mia is also a dual building enabler, but that's pretty much the extent of that, because Mia is obviously harder to merge, harder to obtain copies of, and is a little bit outdated in terms of stats, where Deen here is definitely higher statted than both Merlinus and Mia. Moving on though, and probably what a lot of you people likely dismissed Deen on, was the comparison with Yuri. And yes, Yuri is actually better in most cases. I think I would say decisively that Yuri is better than Deen. However, there's a couple of things that would be a big difference here, in that Yuri is susceptible to a lot of the things that Deen might not be. So being a cav, Deen has access to stuff like Ward Cavalry, whereas Yuri has access to stuff like Null Follow-Up and Times Pulse. And generally speaking, I think that is pretty good, but Deen definitely fits into a more cavalry type team better than Yuri does. Yuri most likely also keeps his preference weapon, but that doesn't mean you can't inherit stuff, and Kanto generally is not so good on defense. So if we're talking defense-wise, definitely Yuri's gonna maybe be a bit better because of that access to infantry stuff, but he does have a couple of the weaknesses. Even stuff like Stall is gonna mess up Yuri, where it doesn't really mess up Deen. Grav will definitely hit both of them, but now that we have stuff like Reeve and other sources of stall ploy which may come out, Yuri can see more counterplay where Deen would ignore that. Also, of course, Deen is easier to merge than Yuri, so the stat discrepancy there definitely shrinks between the two. But at the end of the day, Yuri is a bit better, and they kind of fulfill similar roles, but there are advantages to both, and of course stall ploy was one of them. Now, if you wanted to use Deen, then you would have to give him C-Dual Cavalry 4, which is honestly pretty hard to get because I believe it's only on Sol right now. So I don't see many of you doing this, but it is technically an option, and he would be kind of okay there as well, because he would have access to stuff like Vicious Dagger with Windsweep, or Quick Dagger with Trace, as shown here. But there's definitely a lot of flexibility in how you choose to go about this. Snag as fodder is not even worth talking about. It's not really used anywhere. But I want to move on to a couple more relevant builds, which include air offense, and as what you'll notice, it's fairly similar in role to Yuri. However, it's a bit harder to set up than it would be with Yuri, because Yuri has to use stuff like, has access to stuff like Times Pulse and Infantry Pulse, whereas Yuri will likely have to depend on partners such as Valoria, Raphael, or Legendary Hector for acceleration. If you combine that with Quick Dagger, he can actually charge up his AoE just like Yuri can and fulfill a very similar role. The one on the far left here is the most budget you can go, which pretty much is giving him like life and death Windsweep with an AoE. He has a decent attack stat to make that work, but like I said, you're gonna require one of these special accelerators to make it work. If you choose to use Valoria, you can actually use life and death seal, which really will help him with that AoE punch through to break through a lot of tanky setups. The Cav mobility is also really good, and he does scale with merges up until +9 to get as much attack as possible. Another way you could use him, of course, is with Fury Seal and Fury. However, that will likely require more Disarm Trap, and Disarm Trap is, it's not super exclusive, but it definitely will stop many players from trying to set that up. As I said, an alternative like Windsweep can work, and there's still going to be other things you can do as well, such as the Vicious Dagger with Windsweep. That also is an option, or Courtly Fan, depending on how you go about it. But Double Fury can work with him. It just requires probably like 3 combats, depending on how many mythics you have, because of his HP being a bit higher than desirable, I guess. Bone Carver with the Wings of Mercy enabling plays, where he's the initiator, is still pretty good though, because Bone Carver acts as like a Savage Blow, and Savage Blow combined with Savage Blow is actually pretty good for another ally that he could use, such as Fallen Edelgard, who, in my opinion, using her quite a bit with Wings of Mercy does end up missing quite a few kills, but overcomes that with Savage Blow being splashed upon the enemy team. So yeah, Deen actually shaping up to be pretty cool, because if you consider how prevalent like Yuri is and how good he is, if you kind of fulfill the same role with Deen, he can kind of do the same thing for people who foddered Yuri or don't have Yuri. Of course, the other problem here is that he doesn't have access to Trace like Kanto the same way that Yuri does, but it still fulfills a very similar role, and he can do a lot of the cool things that Yuri can, minus foul play and whatnot. But you get what I'm getting at. Hopefully, it's still pretty decent as a freebie. It's not totally like another Green Axe Infantry or such as Shamir or anyone else, right? So, yeah, if you choose to invest him, again, his attack stat's pretty good and should cut through many things. I want to move on though to air defense, where he also has a pretty solid place, and as I mentioned, because he is a cavalry, he can fit into a lot of cavalry heavy teams, and those cavalry heavy teams are effectively really good because they can add each other, like give each other more bulk using word cavalry and stuff, so it's pretty nice there. Now you can run AoE on defense actually with Legendary Hector. Valoria and Raphael won't, but Hector can still technically pulse if you choose not to run a cavalry heavy team, and AoE by a cavalry unit is very powerful. I've seen instances of like Legendary Lilina charging up her like a bigger AoE, like a Blazing Flame rather than Gifted Magic, and it hits really hard. Same idea here with Deen. If you give him Quick Dagger with attack, he can run that pretty well. In fact, he'd basically be best in this role other than Yuri. But as I mentioned, it depends on what sort of movement types you have. Hector would be required in Fire Season in either Anima or Dark, but generally speaking, I think this is a threat that must be considered. For those of you that are, of course, being overwhelmed by the presence of a Fjorm, both AoE and guard effects, or just outspeeding her, are good answers to Ascendant Fjorm, and I've considered that right here in the most two recent builds. So if you use AoE, not always, depending on the Fjorm player, they might dodge the AoE, but having that as a threat is always pretty good. And the other option, of course, is just running guard with like an armor-slaying weapon, because Fjorm can't take away her armor weakness without basically running Fallen Shield, which is not optimal. And then if she did that, then she'd be weak to like Moonbow, especially when you're running something like Guard. If you run Guard or Guard effects, such as Ruse or whatnot, Fjorm really struggles to deal with that. And on top of that, if you have an enabler such as Bridal Catria, who's giving like a Brave effect with armor slaying on Deen here, it's going to be really powerful. For those of you that have Niffle to fodder, of course. But you can still get by with stuff like ARD attack speed 3, or just any ARD attack variant, or maybe even speed res if you wanted to go budget, are all solid options. At the end of the day, there's just some really good dagger options, and that's what enables a character like Deen to stand out as a freebie. He gets access to premium stats. He's not a meme, such as Merlin is, basically being a meme, so this is actually a pretty solid freebie, and for those that do invest into him, I think you really won't be disappointed. Of course, Yuri does do some things better, notably foul play and Kanto, but not everyone has Yuri, and here we are talking about an F2P option being Deen. So think about it. Maybe it'll help you. If I miss something, always feel free to tell me in the comments what you think of Deen or how you may repurpose Deen. Are you going to go back and play Shadows of Valentia or play it for the first time and pick up Deen because that's Deen? So I don't know. Either way, guys, thank you for watching as always. This basically concludes my Deen analysis. I am watching the comments, I'm watching the thumbs up if you happen to click that, and all the statistics to let me know, plus the feedback you give me to try to improve these videos as best as I can every time. So thank you guys for watching, keep doing what you're doing, keep being awesome, and maybe consider checking me out on Twitch, which I probably will be live as soon as this video is uploaded, for some practical usage of the stuff we talk about here. Theory into practice, as I try to encourage. Thank you guys, see you in the next one. Much love. Peace.
It's over.